All right, let's stay with our globe-trotting Prime Minister. New York last week, London over the weekend. You can see there he's in Abu Dhabi, but where it's caused political controversy is his attendance at a UK Labor conference, warning against the rise of the populist right, adopting very US-style rhetoric about democracy being at stake.
But what I see here in UK Labor, under this man, this leader, this Prime Minister, my friend, is the same determination that I know lives in every member of the Australian Labor Party. An absolute resolve to stand together and defend democracy itself.
Joining me now, Sky News political contributor Chris Uhlmann. Chris, a legion of criticism today, not just from the opposition, you'd sort of expect that, but a number of mastheads, a number of journalists travelling with the Prime Minister have argued that it's very indulgent to have attended this political conference in Birmingham, I think it was, and the PM's own departmental officials, so the public servants, abandoned him on the last leg. They felt very uncomfortable about the political tone of that speech. Is there anything here that concerns you?
Yeah, well, Peter, I think as a general rule, Prime Ministers should avoid going to partisan events when they're overseas, but I am old enough to have been on the plane that took Scott Morrison to Wapakoneta in Ohio, to the Pratt factory, in the company of Donald Trump, into what turned out to be a Donald Trump rally, essentially, that Scott Morrison was smack bang in the middle of. Now, he might argue that he wasn't expecting that, but I think that you could know that anywhere where you went with Donald Trump to that kind of event, that was what it's going to be. So, yeah, I do agree Prime Ministers should try to avoid doing that sort of thing, but Anthony Albanese's not on his lonesome when it comes to doing that.
Yeah, I do feel at the moment, if you look at his schedule since he was returned in May, I accept that there's the summit season, there's things to do, but he's spending an inordinate amount of time away. And it wasn't just obviously that Labor conference, there was this whole left-wing conference going on in the UK. He bought into all of that. There appears to be quite a bit of concern on the left about the rise of the populist right, concern obviously about reform in the UK, other parties like the AfD and others in Europe, Le Pen's movement back in France. Obviously, we've seen Donald Trump in the United States. And so there's an attempt with this term, and our PM's using it quite a bit now, progressive patriotism, to try and buy back those people that have left the centre and left the left because they don't feel that anyone's really defending their culture. Have a listen.
We do that by embracing patriotism as a truly progressive cause, by demonstrating that our love of country is what drives us to serve it, and also to change it for the better, by encouraging pride in everything that sets our nations apart from the world.
I think they're really spooked by the British flags and the rallies, and the same thing here in Australia, but I think it's a bit rich coming from a bloke who can't decide which flag is the national flag. He puts all three of them on his plane now. I watch him overseas. The entourage carry the flags. I'm surprised there wasn't three on the stage behind him in Birmingham, Chris. But do you think the left are spooked by what's been playing out on the streets of London in particular?
Oh, look, I have no doubt about that, Peter, and it's essentially a reaction to mass migration, people feeling that they're losing control of their country, and certainly in the UK, I think you could put a big chunk of that down to Brexit. But I think in Australia, things are quite different, and we push more towards the centre here, mainly because of our electoral system, and I do worry about the extremes on the right and on the left. But can I say in Australia, I worry that it's the extremes of the left which are commanding all of the levers of power in Australia. And I'll give you one example. At the moment, we have the Sex Discrimination Commissioner arguing before court that there is no such thing as male or female. Now, I would think that's a pretty extreme position, and that may now well be entrenched in law, and there's nothing that you or I can do to change that. And that will have an enormous effect on women and their safe spaces in Australia. I believe that's an extremist position. That worries me, but I don't hear anyone complaining about that.
Well, you have me watching me, Chris, because I've been banging on about that for about 5 years now, because it all started in Victoria.
I'm leaving us aside on that one.
Under Daniel Andrews. Under Daniel Andrews, and it's infected every other jurisdiction in this country. It's something that's gone overseas. We obviously saw it be quite a feature in Scotland at one time, and it lost the Scottish leader her job, and it was repudiated in legislation coming out of Britain. So it's not in the UK in the way it is here in Australia. But yeah, it's a huge issue. And a bit later on, I'm going to talk to Rachel Wong about what's happening in a prison in Victoria where a convicted pedophile who sexually abused his 5-year-old daughter now identifies as a woman and is in a prison with women. But I'll come to that. If you think that's bad, what's going to happen now with this push by the Human Rights Commission, basically supported today by the Commissioner Lorraine Finlay in The Australian? So it's not a rumour, this is a real push to shut down what I would regard as any debate that's critical of a very, very pro-climate position.
Oh, Peter, now there's a Senate committee hearing at the moment which is looking into what they call astroturfing, and the entire reason for doing that is because what the Greens would argue is that the people who argue against the government's climate policies and against their policies, and can I say that's what I argue against, it's the policies, it's not the idea as to whether or not there is such a thing as climate change. But now that all gets lumped together. So if you or I say we think that net zero is a fraud, then you get accused of being a climate denier. If you say that you think that the government's program when it comes to trying to transition our energy system is not going to be work, it's going to be ridiculously expensive, you get accused of being a climate change denier. Now, the Greens would like to see legislation that charges people like us for our ideas, and it would appear that the Human Rights Commissioner is at least in part on board. I see all the qualifications that are put around that. But can I say, again, I'm old. I remember arguing against 18C on the racial discrimination bill back in the 1990s and saying it would be extended to a point where people would be prosecuted for their points of view. And that's exactly what happened. So I have no trust at all in the Human Rights Commission, particularly when I see the way the Human Rights Commissioner and the Sex Discrimination Commissioner are acting. I think that they are extremists and that they are a real and present danger to free speech in this country.
There's no consistency of argument here because biological science doesn't matter if you want to identify as a woman. Climate science does matter, so we can't contest anything to do with the climate science. And I'm not saying whether or not climate change is real, leave that for people to go down the rabbit burrow on. I'm talking about physics reality or engineering science. That can you do what Chris Bowen wants us to do in the available time with the engineering reality we have in Australia and the intermittent weather science of the wind and the intermittent sun, unless he comes up with something to make the sun shine at night, Chris. I mean, why can't we debate these things, but others we are not allowed to debate, some we can? None of this makes any sense.
Well, Peter, they wonder why people get angry, and people get angry because the quite reasonable views that we have are, in the end, criminalised. That's what's being attempted here. And you're dead right. I mean, if you can actually argue, as the Sex Discrimination Commissioner does, that there's no such thing as male and female, then when I say that I think that climate change is real, but perhaps the largest scare campaign in human history, it doesn't mean I'm denying the science. I'm just saying that I think the science is being radically overwhelmed. And certainly nothing I say is anywhere near as radical as what the Sex Discrimination Commissioner is claiming in her remit. But let's make no mistake about this. There is an attempt by those on the left to try and silence people who criticise the policies of government, not the science, but the policies of government in response to what they see as a threat. And I see that as a genuine threat to free speech in this country. And in the end, Peter, I think what will happen with this stuff is that, you know, the government's plans will not fall over because of a political debate. They will fall over because of physics and as the rest of the world abandons them. But in the meantime, they'll try and shut up people like you and me.
Well, not going to happen, Chris. You're not going anywhere, either am I. I'll leave it there.
See you in jail.
Here.
Probably be in the
Gavin
same cell.
Newsom, of course. Yeah, well, probably, yes. If you identify as a woman, of course, you can share with me.